Hi and thanks for joining me today. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make this card using the Zig Clean colour brushes. Before I start showing you about the card, I just want to show you a few tips that I've learned so far since I've had these colour brushes in my stash. Now, to start off with, you can apply the colour directly from the pen, then using a different colour pen you can actually blend that out and get a beautiful gradient changing colour. This in no way damages your pen, as it's a brush tip marker. You can just scribble it off on some scrap paper and it's fine to use for the next one. Now, another tip for using these is apply a bit of colour using a Zig Clean colour brush and then go in with a Wink of Stella glitter pen, and this will give you a beautiful gradient coming down. I think it's something about the viscosity of the liquid in this, but it really does blend it out beautifully. And again, like the Zig Clean colour brush, it won't damage your Wink of Stella. Just wipe off any excess onto a piece of scrap paper. Now, the third way of doing this is, of course, using these pens as you would any watercolour. So you can apply it to any non-porous surface. So I've applied it to my craft mat and my acrylic block, and then I'm just going in with my water brush, adding some water and picking up a bit of colour, very light bit of colour to start off with. And of course, as you can do with watercolours, you can control how much you put down. These products are, I would have to say, really unique and excellent for a crafter like me who may not have the world's greatest patience when it comes to watercolouring. You know, you can control the areas that you want darker, you can add shading with the pen directly onto your image, and frankly, they're just a lot easier to use. Now, I'm using this Beautiful Flowers by Simon Says stamp set today. I love this. This has to be one of the most beautiful floral sets I have seen this year. As soon as I saw it, I knew this had to be added to my craft stash. So it's fairly new into my my stash, but I have to say it is just stunning. The florals are huge, they're so much fun to colour, and I just love them. Now, I'm going to be stamping it in some Versamark ink so I can heat emboss. This is a little trick that I tend to do when I'm doing watercolour pieces, is I like to heat emboss, you know, whether it being clear, or today I'm using Ranger Gold. Generally I use clear when I'm doing it, but it just holds the ink in place, or the watercolour, sorry, in place, and allows me, you know, to play with the colours without it running or moving around the paper too much. So when I got my Zig Clean colour brushes, I bought the set of 48. It was the only one that was available here in Doha. I know they come in smaller sets and larger sets, but I just got the 48 to begin with. I am definitely going to be adding more colours to my stash. I love it so much. But I made sure that I swatched each of these colours out, because obviously when you start adding water to them, the colours do change. I didn't do anything fancy. I just got a piece of watercolour cardstock and swatch them out. Now, I just want to say, before I start talking about the painting, I am using Strathmore watercolour paper. I was recommended to use Nina Solar White, but I found that the paper pilled, and I wasn't getting the movement quite right on it. It was sort of, a lot of colour was setting in before I had a chance to move it around on the cardstock, so I would recommend using watercolour paper. I've tried 3 different varieties, 3 different grades, and it's been absolutely fine with all of them. Now, what I'm doing here is I am applying a little bit of colour. These pens are incredibly pigmented, so I'm just putting a little bit of colour down along the inside edges of the flowers, and then I'm using my watercolour brush to pull that colour out, wiping off any excess that is on my brush and then moving it out again. And this is giving me a beautiful blend without very much effort at all. In areas that I thought were a bit too light, I will go over them again later if I feel they're too light. But to be honest with you, for this card, going over it once seemed sufficient, because I'm only doing very, very basic techniques today. So I'm not going to be showing you all of the flowers. I do not want to bore you to death by doing, you know, an hour and a half long video on a bit of watercolouring, which is very basic. So I'm just doing a few petals. Another thing to keep in mind is don't watercolour next to one petal that you've already done. I'm sure you're probably already aware of that, but that's how you end up to colour bleeds and so on and so forth. So yeah, just moving around the flower, adding a little bit of colour down and pulling it out. Something that I do want to say about these pens, I am madly in love with them. I think they're brilliant. I tend to use them mainly for floral images like this, but what I like about them is when they're down on the cardstock, they are incredibly vibrant. If I put a piece of regular watercolouring next to the Zig Clean Colour brushes, it looks dull. The normal watercolours have a sort of duller look to them than these do. These are so vibrant. The only word I can think of to explain what they look like on the cardstock is that they glow off of the cardstock at you. They are just stunningly beautiful. So here I'm going in with the deep green. I'm doing exactly the same thing that I did with the flowers. I'm just adding a little bit at the base of each leaf and then pulling it up the spine and moving it around the cardstock till I'm happy with how it's blended out. Now of course you can go back in with your Zig Clean Colour brushes, you can go over with different colours and create shadows and add more depth to it, but like I said, I just wanted to keep it very, very basic for this one. So if anyone's interested in these, this is just a very basic idea of what you could do with them. If you're skilled at watercolouring, I am sure you could create some absolutely magnificent pieces with these. Now once all of the leaves were coloured in, I am going in to the centres and adding just a little bit of brown, blending that all the way around on all three flowers. As you see, I'm not even wiping off my brush here, I'm just quickly going in, scribbling it down, and then going back in with my Zig and colouring in a little bit more, so there is a little bit more depth to the centres. And now for me, I am absolutely awful at doing the background colours. For some reason I never seem to get it to blend out really smoothly with normal watercolours or even distress inks, but with this it just does it for the work for you. As you pull the colour out, it just lightly fades out, so there is not that much effort needed at all. This is just orange, but it really helps make the image stand out, I think. Apologise if you can hear humming in the background. Unfortunately the weather here has become extremely hot recently and I am forced to have my AC on, so that's the humming you can hear in the background. Now these are quite pricey, definitely here in Doha. I know that in America they are a couple of $100 difference cheaper, but they are quite an investment to put in your craft stash. I spent about 8 months sitting there thinking, should I get them? Am I really going to use them? I don't use my watercolours that often. Is it worth it? But I have to say, for me, this is definitely hands down one of the best watercolour tools that I have bought for myself. Now I wanted to add a bit of interest to the card, so it wasn't just a watercoloured piece, and I decided that I was going to stamp the sentiment in Versamark ink on a piece of black cardstock and heat emboss it with white heat embossing powder just to make it stand out and add some, I can't think of the word, make it stand out from the watercolour piece. So here I am using my Hero Arts white embossing powder. This is a really nice crisp white. Another thing that I should have pointed out earlier, but I was so busy rambling on about the Zig Clean Colour brushes, is you definitely, if you're heat embossing, you definitely want to use an embossing buddy or some form of embossing tool on watercolour paper. As it's textured paper, it's more likely to pick up any embossing powder in areas that you don't want it to be, basically. So just to save yourself the hassle of trying to remove it later on, use an embossing buddy, it's a lot easier. Now I have trimmed this panel down. I can't give you the exact measurements, it was just you know, quick trimming down, possibly taking off 1/4 of an inch from the top and bottom, and I am putting a black mat underneath it just to tie it in with the sentiment strip. So I'm just using my tape runner. Because my watercolour paper didn't get that wet, I didn't need to tape it down, and I can just use normal tape runner to hold it in place. And then I'm taping the entire panel onto a top folding note card. I really don't know what my obsession is with top folding note cards. I never used to make them, and lately they seem to be the only thing that I make. So there it is. But thank you so much for joining me today. If you like videos like this or you want to see more but from me, please subscribe, add any comments, questions, and check out my blog for more information. Till next time, take care. Bye.